Welcome to another incredible episode of Faith in Media with me, Carla, your host. And I'm joined today by the viral influencer, John Reynolds. John, thank you so much for being with us at Faith in Media. I like to tell people about our guests, but I always feel it's better if they do the introductions. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and just kind of the level of influence that you've reached, which has just been amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Carla. It's such a pleasure to be here. And yes, I'm John Reynolds. I've been a full-time content creator for about a year, and it all kind of blew up really on social media about 2 years ago. So I became a Christian when I was about 18, going to like a local church. Wasn't really, I always believed that there must be more to life than this, but I found a lot of the claims of the Bible to be a bit wild. And so I was trying to sort of reconcile that. I definitely would never have put myself in the atheist term, but maybe agnostic, and kind of got a few invites to church from a friend, and started going to a local youth group, and then decided, like, actually, I think I will try church. And it kind of all went from there. And I then studied for a few years at London School of Theology, which was amazing. It's where I met my wife. So I've got a degree in theology, which really helped me coming to faith in my late teens. I think I did a gap year as a youth intern before uni at the church I became a Christian at, and I just got asked questions that I just had no idea the answer of by like the young people who'd been in church for like years. So I was leading some of their stuff, trying to like develop my leadership and things. And the senior leadership team had sent some gifts to me that they were like, "Do you want to do maybe like a youth internship?"
Yeah.
And yeah, it kind of I felt I loved God and Jesus had changed my life, but at the same time, there's so much I did not know. I had this revelation one day. I've probably been a Christian about 6, 7, 8, 9 months maybe, and I remember thinking, "Oh, David and Goliath is in the Bible," like, and it was just because there's a giant in the story, so I put it with like Aesop's fables, or like the troll that lived under the bridge, or like Jack and the Beanstalk. I hadn't thought about the fact that, oh wow, okay. And so I was very sort of new to it all, really, didn't have much like Bible knowledge at all. Did my degree. And then since graduating for a decade, just over, I was a youth pastor at various different churches, Baptist churches, Church of England. And we moved up to Lancashire 2 years ago from Kent to be part of a Church of England church up here, St Luke's Blackburn, which we absolutely love. And I was the youth pastor. And while I was up here, I just shared a story on my Instagram one day of my son. We got back from church one day, and he was writing. He was like, "Daddy, I want to be an author," and I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, I didn't even know he knew the word, and I was like, "Okay, go for it." I mean, I don't think that's his set career from now. Since then, he's wanted to be Godzilla and various other things as well. So I don't think
Take it with a pinch of
I
salt.
don't think. Yeah, but he started writing out, and as I say, this is just over a year ago. And his writing, initially, I could sort of read it. It was like once upon Tim. I was like, okay, yeah, once upon a time. I was trying to piece it together, and as it went on, his writing sort of all sloped, and kind of all the gaps between the words became it was very, very difficult to read. But as many parents will know, like children, like they'll sometimes just give you something and go, "Daddy, can you read this for me?" And I was like, "Oh gosh." And you don't want to upset them by asking again and again and again, "What does this say?" But you also don't want to get it wrong. And so I was sharing this story on my Instagram story because basically he got increasingly frustrated with me. It was the story of Cinderella, by the way. So like he totally plagiarized the whole thing. It wasn't like a unique idea. But it was like once upon Tim, and then I was like, "Okay, mirror, mirror on the wall." And he was like, "Oh, Daddy, you just..." And he snatched it off me and went, "I'm going to go and take it to Mummy." Now along the way, he told me like each bit. So he'd been like, "It says mirror, mirror on the wall," or "Oh, Daddy, it says like, who is the fairest of them all," or whatever. And so my wife in another room had heard him tell me basically every bit that I'd got wrong. She'd heard the constant correction. She'd heard the whole story. So then when he took it to her, she read it perfectly.
Oh gosh, unfair, unfair.
He'd heard it all. And so I was sharing this story because he then comes back and he goes really smugly as well, like, "Daddy, I do think mummy is a better reader than you.
Oh,
And
wow.
then, like a teacher who was like correcting me or like admonishing me a bit, he went, "You really do need to work on your reading."
I have no words. Are they just not the
So
most amazing things? Gosh.
it's just so funny how you see, I think with kids, you see yourself come out and you see sometimes they'll say a phrase and you're like, their teacher must say that because it's like an adult phrase. So even like you really do need to work on like, whatever, insert whatever. And so I shared that on my Instagram story, and it was just for like friends and family at the time. Like I didn't really have any followers who like followed me for any other reason. I wasn't doing like comedy content or stories or anything like that really. And I just got a whole load of DMs from like friends and family being like, "This is really funny," etc. And so I thought I'll whack it on TikTok, like I'll just see how it goes. And it got like 50,000 views, and suddenly I went from having like 100 followers who are all just friends on TikTok to like a few thousand, and suddenly I was followed on that platform more than any other. And I was like, oh wow, like that's kind of that's really caught on. I then shared not that long after that the story of my first date with my wife, which I won't go into the whole story of. You can, it's because the video is probably about 4 minutes or so, but you can check it out on my TikTok if you like. But basically, my wife's paraplegic. She became
Mhm.
paralysed when she was 12, and she's a wheelchair user. And when we went into the cinema on our first day, I hadn't realised that the second we got there were just steps to get in. And I looked over, I was like, oh my gosh, like I literally don't know what to do. And Jade noticed that there was a little like lift beside it, like one of the little platform lifts. So I went in to find the guy and was like, sorry, I'm with a lady in a wheelchair. Would you mind coming to help us? And he sort of like looked at me and I was like, and then he just went, yeah, you need a key. And I was like, yeah, she doesn't come with one. Like, is there any chance you can go and have a look? And so he went off to get like this key. It took ages. And we got in. But then when we ordered our tickets to go in, he looked even more sheepish and was like, I'm really sorry, but the screening for the film you want to see is upstairs. And I was like, oh, like, don't tell me like you've lost the key for the main lift or something. And he said, what main lift? And it was a listed building, so there was no lift. So on our first date, I carried my wife up about 30 steps into our cinema screen. So I tell that story on TikTok. And obviously, for people who don't have the context, but people who don't have the context, it looks like I'm just being like super romantic or like,
It
because we
really
left her
is.
wheelchair down. Well, we left the wheelchair down in the foyer because it was just easier. Obviously, I couldn't carry her in her chair, and so I carried her up the steps. But as we went into the screen, you could see like women looking like oh, and men being like oh, why is he doing that for? Like showing us up almost, but totally unaware that I had to carry her because she couldn't
Yeah.
walk.
I mean,
So I shared
was
that
this the
story.
moment that you both knew this is it? Because I mean, that's a huge gesture.
It's it's funny because I think that's definitely been I think that's one of the reasons it did quite well. And it's funny for us because I think because we'd known each other, we met at university but didn't start dating until I'd left uni.
Wow.
Jade was the year below me, so she was still there. So
Hmm.
I'd seen quite a lot of people occasionally carry Jade if the lift at uni was broken or if like there was just the need to do that.
Okay.
And so for me, it felt more just practical. And Jade's been used to being lifted by people
Yes.
and things. So I
Yes.
think it feels, and also because it was a first date, there's always that element of like you want to impress a bit, like you don't want to come across like somebody, particularly as obviously I was aware of her paralysis and her
Mm.
disability. So I knew a big part of that. It was really early days, so I wasn't like, I know I want to marry her and I need to impress her enough for her to know I can cope with her
Yeah. Yeah.
disability. But there was obviously still that thing of I need to know if I can cope with that for myself. She needs to know if I can cope with that. So obviously I just said to her like, should I carry you up? Like, are you happy? Kind of thing. And she was like, well, yeah, like we don't want to miss the film and things. And so it probably was more practical than romantic, even though the optics of it looks super like film Hollywoody kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, no, it was but when I shared that story on TikTok, that got like 2 million views or something, and it just went crazy. And suddenly, within I think the first post I really did, the post of Elijah, my son, was in the April, and by like the end of May, I had like 100,000 followers on TikTok, and it just
Wow.
boomed. And TikTok's really wild like that because
Mm.
we've got I think we've got 580,000 followers on TikTok at the moment, but almost half of those have come over 2 1 month periods. Like we got about 130,000 in January 2023, just because videos just went big. And then you
Mm.
have some months where you get like 2,000 followers, which is just feels like, at one point, if I was getting 2,000 followers in a month, you'd be like, wow, this is great. But like in comparison, and like the
Mm.
percentage of that, and like compared to other months is obviously
Yeah.
smaller. But it's just wild. The social media's virability and things just feels so strange, and you can. It feels like there's no rhyme or reason. As a content creator, you can send yourself crazy when you. I've got to the place where I think I just want to produce videos that I think are entertaining or funny.
Yeah.
What, because you can't control the results of it. Like I've had videos where I think like I'm really tired, but we got back from speaking at Spring Harvest last year actually, and when we came back, I hadn't managed to do any videos while we were away for 2 or 3 days, and I was like, when I got back, my kids greeted us. It was really funny, the difference. Like Elijah, my 7-year-old, was like at the door, like, "Mummy, Dad." Like you'd think we'd been away for like a month or something, like, and he wasn't ever sure we'd make it back or something. We'd been away for about 48 hours. "Mummy, Daddy." He was like so happy at the door, like a little puppy. And Arilee's my sassy 4-year-old, and she was like, I came in and like after hugging Elijah, and like she was just looking at me like that. And I was like, nice. I was like, Ariel, are you okay? And she just went, "Where have you been?" And I was like, "You know where we've been, darling." Like she wasn't left on her own.
Those
She,
impressions
she,
are frightening, John, but they seem so apt. So apt. I'm impressed.
she went, "Where have you been?" And I went, "You know where we've been, darling. We've been away. We've been speaking about Jesus." And she went, "I'm hungry." And that was literally where she was at with it. And so I shared that, and I basically, that's how we were greeted when we got home. And so
Mm.
I knew it was funny. Once they'd gone to bed, like about, I think we got back about 7 or so. So put them to bed. I very quickly, after a tired, busy weekend, filmed that, popped it up online. I thought it's quite funny, but like I felt like I'd done videos that I'd put a lot more thought into, and a lot more. Yeah, okay, this is how I could say it, and etc. etc. And it got it. I think it's one of the few videos that's gone viral on different platforms as well. So like TikTok, it did really well. I think it got about 4 million on there and about 5 million on Instagram. And it's so strange sometimes how, even watching it back now, I can see it's funny, but it doesn't feel like it's 4 or 5 million views funny. Like,
Yeah.
and there are other videos I do where I feel like I've put so much effort into this. Even
Mm.
when I rewatch it, I'm really like happy with it. I think it's brilliant, or I'm really proud of how I've done that one. And then it gets like a few thousand views, and you're like, I don't know why that didn't connect. Or it will go big on one platform and get nothing on another. And I think it's yeah, if you get your sense of achievement or even identity from results, sometimes like it's a balance, isn't it? Because if you want to be a musician and everyone you know who loves you tells you you're not actually good enough to become a musician, like the kind of tough love, but like
Yeah.
telling you the truth to be
Yeah.
kind, then you can't go, well, it's not a results business, I'm just going to keep going, because you think, well, no, there has to be some results somewhere at
Mm.
some
Mhm.
point for
Mhm.
you to be successful. Yet at the same time, you can't be a slave to other people's opinions of you when once you have formed some level of success in an area, you realize that like you can't, if you're only as good as your last song, or only as good as your last article, or only as good as your last video or whatever, you'll just have no stability in life. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a really tough thing to learn sometimes, and it can be really disappointing and demoralizing at times, particularly when you go through those periods where it feels like you can't catch a break.
And
But
I'm so glad
equally,
you raised that, because like I think for lots of young people that are looking at this space as, because this is now a trending thing. This is now like they see so many influences, and they want to aspire to that. But honestly, those on the other side, you hear the story that you've described. You're kind of at its mercy if this is what you want to do.
yeah.
And how do you stabilize your inside, if I may ask about that? That's a real sense of identity.
Mm.
Like, you know who you are, you know
Mm.
why you're using the platforms. And I'm really glad that you spent such a great time and really explaining like the ins and outs of how you navigate that space and what that means for you. But it sounds like there is such
Mm.
a healthy distance between this is what I do, but this is not who I am. And how do I keep the me part kind of sane in all of this? It could happen today. It could pull me in, millions of kind
Yeah.
of responses tomorrow and also have nothing. It doesn't, how does it kind of stabilize my sense of value and self-worth? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, such a great question. And it's really hard to do because I think almost any creative, no matter what they are creating, creates out of who they are. And so
Mm,
there is that element of it feeling quite fundamental, even to spiritualize it. Because I think sometimes we can be like, you aren't who you are, yet at the same time we also know that the more you do something, the more you are likely to become that kind of person, whether that is virtuous or sinful. Like, you lie once and you don't get the reputation of being a liar, but like your reputation's based on your repetition. So if all you do is lie, like,
yeah.
yes, there's a difference between the sin and the sinner, and yes, God like doesn't love the sin, but he does love the sinner. Yet at the same time, if you've got yourself a reputation in a negative way, there's some work to be done. So it's very hard sometimes to divorce ourselves from
Mm,
what we do. And I think it's more complex sometimes than we also like to admit. But I think equally, at a base level, we also know we aren't what we do. Like Paul,
mm,
even in the Bible, talks about, I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I do want to do. And so even there's that war raging within us, I think,
mm,
even on a moral level, about like, who are we, and does what we do define that? And I think that can be even deeper when it brings a sense of, it's something I wrestle with all the time, because like
mm,
the classic, is there an altruistic act, or is anything really for other people? And I can't remember. I think it might be called Deep and, not Deep and Lowly, Gentle and Lowly. There's a book called Gentle and Lowly, which I think describes it really well. And it's talking about, I guess, ego and motives. And
mm,
the guy in there talks about, I can't remember the author, but people can look it up. But he says in there, it's not, if sin was the color blue, it's not
mm.
that some things are blue and some things aren't. It's that almost everything we do has a tint of blue in it. And I think, it sounds really pessimistic, but I think when we're honest with ourselves, it's like, when I'm doing a video, do I only care about the audience? Do I only care about making them laugh? Or is there a part of me that really hopes they think I'm a funny and great person because of it? Well, there's always going to be a part of that. The
Yeah.
same when you preach. Like, there's that part of you that really wants the kingdom of God to invade, or really wants people's
Mm,
lives to be transformed by Jesus. Yet at the same time, obviously, there's still a part of you that thinks, I hope people think I'm a good preacher. And is even that bad? Because if you've been given a gift, there's the whole parable of the talents. If you've been given a gift, you're not supposed to bury it. You're supposed to use it for other people. So is the acknowledgement that you're a good preacher, if you are one, also really an acknowledgement of the good gift God has given you and how
yeah.
obedient you've been in
Yeah.
using it? And
Yeah.
so it's all so like complex, I think, that
There's
like,
tension in there, isn't there, in all of those kind of like the
mm,
kind of intersections that you mentioned there. It is bringing parts of ourselves, but also it's not for ourselves. And particularly if you're looking at it through the
yeah.
Christian lens, which I think leads me so well to my next question. How does the intersectionality of your Christian faith and your content creation kind of like
Mm.
work for you? Would you call yourself as, I'm a Christian in media, or am I in media and I happen to be a Christian? How do you kind of see yourself in that kind of context?
Yeah, I think I'm, first and foremost, I'm a Christian. Like, we've had the chat, that I feel like that's my fundamental identity, and out of everything else flows out of that. It's just the lens that I see the world through it and everything. And so there'll always be that is the starting point. And I think also I do feel missional. Like, my heart has always been, I think because I became a Christian in my late teens, and I can remember what it's like to genuinely think, church and faith and by the Bible and Jesus is very, very weird. And I can really remember how I felt when I felt those things, to now be in the place where actually, if Jesus is the perfect representation of humanity, which I believe he is, then rather than being weird, he's the most normal person who's ever existed. And he's the person that we're trying to be like. And that's what life should look like in some way, shape or form. I think that's my starting point. But I think also, again, it's attention. So like a lot of people who, I would say that fundamentally, my content isn't Christian because that's not how it started. I just told a story. And that's how the platform we have grew, was people enjoyed the stories, and then people maybe loved my wife and like my banter with my wife, and kind of maybe even some of the dark humor around disability and those kind of things. And I think like our kind of main aim through content creation is to be a wholesome, funny family. I think they're the kind of things that I like to bring out because I think they're universal. And from a Christian perspective, wholesomeness looks as much like purity and Jesus as it can. But I think wholesome is a word that is accepted wholesale. Like, people like wholesomeness, even if they're not really sure what that means or how to identify it. And I think I can't remember who said it and where I heard it, but somebody said, like, too often we're shouting Jesus is the answer at a world that isn't asking any questions. And instead the challenge is to kind of live in such a way where people go like, why are you different? And then you get the right to talk about it more. And I think there's definitely truth in that, particularly in the age we find ourselves. And so I think a lot of it is that on TikTok lives, I'll talk a lot more about my faith because it's more like this. You just get a load of questions, like people will message in and it'll be like, what's your favourite colour? What's your kid's favourite Disney princess? What's your job? And that often segues when I then say it's content creation. They're like, oh, what was it before then? And then youth pastor. And then the opportunity to talk about faith arises. I may well at some point do a video about a bit of my testimony and things, and but at the same time, I think I'd always want to do it in a way that's like, look, this is a deviation from my normal content. And I'm sharing this because sometimes people have asked me, like, why do you believe in God and things? But I think I don't want to bait and switch people too much. I don't want it to be, too much of a like, I just don't want it to feel, like as I said, it like a bait and switch. I don't want it to feel like now I've got people in with the funnies and things. Let's talk about our Lord and Saviour in a way that feels like they've been sucker punched, I guess. But, hoodwinked is a great word. Yeah, exactly. But at the same, because I know how I would have reacted to that before I was a Christian. But at the same time, I think it's just trying to put a stone in people's shoes. It's trying to think like, oh, I really like. I think so often I say our mission statement in our heads for my wife and I is to normalise faith and to normalise disability. And that's not fundamentally, it's just being funny, really. And I'd say mission statement makes it sound like that's the agenda behind every video, and that's not true, because one of the biggest agendas behind every video is to just make them funny, to just make them entertaining. And if you can do that in a way that isn't sinful, then you can do whatever you like within that. But I think the byproduct maybe that we hope to see happen is, where did my opinion when I was 18 that Christians were weird come from? When I became a Christian and actually knew some Christians, I mean, some of them are still weird, but
I think we all are in some shape or form, but my weirdness is slightly different to your weirdness, so it's still
definitely. But like, and most people are found just so down to earth, just so normal, just like me, but a lot happier, or just like me, but they felt like seemed a lot more peaceful or a lot more joyful. And so I think like a lot of it is kind of getting to that when people say, oh, all Christians are bigoted, or all
Mm,
Christians are
mm,
judgmental, or all Christians are X, Y, Z. I usually think it's a shame you think that, because I think that's indicative that you actually haven't met very many.
yeah,
Like, not that we're perfect by any means, not that we're never those things,
yeah,
but yeah, and I think similarly with disability, like
mm,
I had no idea how much my wife would struggle with various things in life, or how some things you think would be a struggle aren't, and some things you would never think of would
mm,
be a
mm.
struggle are. And so I think like the more this stuff is, people are aware of it, the easier it is to understand it, accept it as well, and love people
Yeah,
regardless of your differences, and maybe even realize you've got more similarities than you thought,
yeah.
and become a Christian even maybe.
I think it's so good to hear you talk about that, and I think my next question, I think it goes quite well into what you're saying, is how do you're presenting a very authentic, representation of Christianity that not everyone's going to see. This might be their only opportunity to see a normal family that has challenges probably as much as the next. And this
Yeah.
is to do with it through humor, comedy, like real humanness. And I think it's quite brave to put it in such a public platform. How do you deal
Mm.
with kind of like, still, yes, we're open to for the viewing of people to see an example, but how do you
Mm.
create a sense of protection and boundary also to protect your family? Because I imagine as much as this is public, it probably comes with pros and cons. So it'd be really great to hear how you guys navigate that as a family.
Yeah, I think it's it's definitely difficult, because there, there's a weird idea that putting something out there public means that not that everyone may have an opinion of that, and
Yeah,
that's true.
yeah,
But
yeah.
everyone's opinion must be heard by you and taken on
Mhm.
board by you, and that
Mhm.
bit's not true, because like it depends what that opinion is, and it depends how much. It kind of depends where you've got that opinion from. What I've realised a lot is, and it's hard for me because I've got ADHD, and one of the kind of aspects of that is having rejection sensitivity. So you really just want everyone to love you,
This
and if
is
somebody's like,
this is like the worst line of work to be involved in, surely,
yeah,
then, John.
it's definitely, you definitely have to like learn. And sometimes there's elements where you're just like, oh, well, you're just wrong and things. But and I guess like all of us, like we have days where we're more sensitive and less sensitive. We have
Mm.
some days where we're like, oh, on another day that would have really upset me, but actually,
Right, right.
I feel really confident in who I am today, and like never mind, like water off a duck's back. And other days where you're like, they didn't even say anything that bad, but it's really cut me to the core. But I think that one of the things I've realised, and I think it comes from a book called Crucial Conversations, something like that. So, is that we tend to think that between the facts of something happening and our
Mm,
feelings, so something happens and then we feel that way. And so, whoever did that thing to us to make us feel that way is wrong. But this
mm,
book talks about the reality is between the facts of what happened and how you feel about those things is the story you tell yourself. So a
yes.
husband comes home late from work, or a husband texts his wife, "I'm really sorry, I'm still going to be another hour. I'm running late." She texts back, "Okay, full stop." And he thinks she is furious.
Yeah.
Like, she's put a full stop, very short message, and she's put a full stop. She is so angry. Whereas actually, what also might be true is she's busy at home and things. She's not really bothered one way or not, but she's got quite a lot on. And she's just like, okay. And then she's cracking on. And
Yeah.
so you can, and then so the husband might even come home and be like, "Oh, I really didn't appreciate your tone with me. It's not my fault I was late." And she's like, "Flipping it, what tone? Firstly, you're late, and now you're coming home and having a go at me." And it can all escalate from there, and solely because of the story you're telling yourself. And I
Yeah.
think people do this a lot online, all the time with us. Like we had one video, Arily, our 4-year-old, was in the park, and she ran over and went, "Mummy, there's someone over there in a wheelchair like you." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And I should have asked an open question, but I didn't really think about it. I should have said, what was her wheelchair like and things, just because I was trying to continue the conversation. She was
Mhm.
about 3 at the time. I love the fact that she
Mhm.
noticed that, and there was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
similarity and things. But I said a leading question, which I thought would lead her into an obvious answer. I went, "Oh, was her wheelchair good?" And then she just went, "No." And I laughed because it was just funny how she'd U-turned. She'd gone from so excited about this lady to just suddenly go, no. Now, she's 3. She doesn't know what a good wheelchair is.
No.
Like, I laughed on the video because you don't see the lady in the video at
No.
all. You literally just see me filming my daughter. And my wife and I both laughed because the lady was in quite a similar wheelchair to Jade, actually. And it was just funny the way she just U-turned. It was just the classic, like, pedantic, I'm not playing your game kind of kid moment. But that video on Facebook, the comments were absolutely mad. Like, people were like, how disgusting of the dad to have laughed at that. Not everybody can afford a good wheelchair. These guys have clearly been booked because Jade was in her motorised wheelchair, which we'd crowdfunded for a few years earlier. It's like an expensive bit of kit. These guys have clearly been born with a silver spoon in their mouth because she's got a beautiful, lovely wheelchair and this lady clearly didn't. It's like, you don't even see the other lady in it. She was actually also in a motorised chair that was great. But people see things and they jump to conclusions and then they pile in. And so, I mean, again, I think in those situations, I find it quite easy for it to be water off a duck's back because you just know it's not true. And you, in the end, you just have to ride the wave of thinking like, I won't do things deliberately controversial for engagement.
Yes.
Yet at the same time, the line of work I'm in now, engagement is good. And so if you know you've not done anything wrong, yet people are jumping to conclusions, but that engagement boosts your video. And lots of people are like, oh, why is everyone jumping to conclusions? Blah, blah, blah. And he clearly laughs because he's so shocked at how sassy his daughter was.
Right.
As a 3-year-old, like Ariely would think a shopping cart sprayed pink was an amazing wheelchair. Like, she's 3. Do you know what I mean? So it's just so funny how people jump to things. I think the things that are more difficult are when you enter into choppier waters or you say something that has been misconstrued, yet at the same time you also have to soul search and think, oh, was I a bit sloppy with the way I said that then, or that isn't what I meant, however,
Yeah.
and things. And so I think it's why, I mean, communication is clear for people, and I think is why you need to try to make sure your communication is clear for people, yet at the same time it's impossible to please everybody. And I think in terms of like protecting the family, again, it's a really difficult one. Like, we've wrestled over initially the stories I just told them, and then every now and then, like, the kids wanted to be in the odd video. Elijah, one of the videos we had that did quite well at the start was my wife and daughter went out for the day and it was just me and Elijah. And he turned to me at one point and went, I went to him, oh, Elijah, look, it's just the boys. It's just the boysies. And he started doing this little dance and song where he went, it's just the boysies, just the boysies. And we basically, I said, that would be a really funny video, Elijah. Do you want to share that? And he does this really cute little thing. It was about, so I think it was about 2 years ago now. So he would have been about 5 at the time. He does this really cute little intro where he's like, when the girls go out and it's just me and my daddy, we do this song and it's like this, the boysy boy, and then he goes into it, and that went really big. And at the end, I just tagged on a little bit where I said, if anyone else wants to do this dance and like tag us in it, you can do a thing where you do the split screen and our dance, the original is next to. And again, that got, it's the classic example of a video that even now I'm like, it's quite sweet, but like it's got about 4 million views and people went crazy for it. And it's just so funny how things can randomly chime with people and then it ends up riding the wave. But we only got lovely comments on that. But you know that for some people it's like you shouldn't put your children online at all, or some people will blur their faces or will not do things. And what are you opening them up to, and what will they think when they look back at this? And even if they're not in the video, what will they think about the story the stories you tell about them? And it's always a hard one because I think you can only go with your own life and your own experience, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, etc., etc. I tend to think that like telling stories about my 3-year-old, 4-year-old being sassy, you think that's 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds though. Like if Ariely as a teenager was like, Dad, like I really don't like the fact that you used to tell everyone basically that I was a bit of a psycho as a child. I'd be like, but I understand what you're saying, but also, lovely, like the reason those videos did so well is that's almost every parent with a 3 or 4 year old. Like, it's called the terrible twos, it's called the three-nager period for a reason. And the reason people like those videos is not because, oh my gosh, what a crazy child. That's nothing like my child. She's horrendous. It was, she's the funny version of my kid, or the way that story was told is so relatable, and things. And so it is really difficult. And some of it is, we won't necessarily know until we get there.
Yeah.
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 I hear that. I hear that. And I also wonder, in terms of just like, what it makes me think about is, so I'm a pastor's child, and most of the time, any kind of time my parents would use illustrations about their real life examples, it would include myself and my sisters. And
Yes.
we did not take kindly to that.
Yeah.
We did. So, and like you say, you don't know. Now I'm just like, but actually, as an older person growing up, that was tough for me. But like you say, I am someone who is a big storyteller. This is why I'm here, even with having the
Yeah.
opportunity. I get to amplify the stories of others as to how powerful they are connecting people together. But I got there
Yeah.
eventually, if that makes sense, until it becomes something that they see the value of it. And I guess, like you say, you just won't know until you get there. Now, social media, the platforms are just evolving so much. What's the outlook that you see happening for yourself, and kind of the stage and position you have with social media?
Sorry. In what way? Sorry.
In terms of moving forward, as it evolves, it keeps changing. What's the outlook that you have for yourself, and the space that you're occupying in social media? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's okay. It's a difficult one, because I think, like, like, it feels like the landscape is always changing a little bit and
Right,
things, and
right.
so even like, you hear different social media platforms. TikTok are trialing a thing now where you don't have to just film in landscape, but you can film in portrait. Sorry, you don't have to just film in portrait. You can film in landscape and turn it your phone, and it
Yeah.
will flick over a bit like YouTube does. And so you hear, like, sometimes they really love shorts, so nothing over 90 seconds, although on YouTube that's nothing over 1 minute. And then you hear on other platforms they're trying to push longer content. And
Right.
so I think it can be quite difficult to navigate it all and to work out, like, where you feel like you're going with it. I think for us, we're trying to be in that position. Like, we love speaking places, we love preaching and teaching as well, and trying to have a foot in both of those camps, where online it's kind of funny, comedy, entertaining, with, like, maybe a bit of light touch evangelism, or even just dropping in the odd we go to church, so that it's just normalized. But equally, we're really passionate about, I think both Jade and I, obviously, yeah, both theology graduates, and I was in ministry for sort of 10, 11 years or so, just really passionate that, and I talk about this a bit on TikTok lives as well with people, is like, it's really important to know why you believe what you believe,
Yeah. Yeah.
almost regardless of what that thing is. And so my big challenge to people that I'll often issue on TikTok is kind of, there are some intelligent reasons to not believe in God, and there are some really dumb reasons to not believe in God. And there are some intelligent reasons for being a Christian, and there's some really dumb reasons to believe there is a God. And some of the dumb reasons, and whichever side you're on, is just like, well, my mum is one. Well,
Yeah.
my dad told me, and it's like, cool. Well, then you're not, then you're not an atheist just because your dad is, or you're not a Christian just because your mum is. Like, unless you know actually why you believe what you believe, that worldview will crumble at some point the second it's tested, even if it's true. Like, even though I believe with all my heart God is real, if what you believe around God is either incorrect, like God will never let you suffer, for instance, and then people who suffer then go, well, there's no God. And you think, well, why
Yeah.
did you ever believe that? Like, Jesus literally dies on a cross. What part of you thinks that you can worship a God who suffers, and then suffering is not going to be part of the plan in some way, shape, or form? And that's not making light of people's suffering. That's not to say it's not brutal. That's not to say
Yeah.
sometimes we don't have questions about why God doesn't take it from us sooner, and etc. etc.
Mm.
But I think that's something that we're really passionate about. So I think, like, the future for us is kind of in that place of wanting to, I think this one of the reasons I was so excited to chat about this, because it feels like it merges those two passions that I've got of like encouraging people who are in media, but also encouraging people in their faith. Of like, I think it's a two-strand thing, and I think I'm equally passionate. The two of the things I've loved ever since I became a Christian. Well, I've always loved making people laugh before as a Christian. And ever since I became a Christian, it was then I love making people laugh, and I love talking about God, and exploring like my faith. And like the small group setting where you're all like, someone shares something and you're like, that's great. Or you think of something. I think on my feet a lot. I think it's the ADHD and big extroversion is like, sometimes I'll be talking to somebody and then I'll say something that I've never said before, and I'll be like, that was quite good actually. I've never thought of that. And even though it's like me that said it, and I'm sure there's some element of like the Holy Spirit working in that and stuff, as well as even just your own brain being a bit interesting. But like, I think like, sometimes I'm the kind of person who, like, if I'm going through a problem, like my wife won't even have to say anything. I'll just be like, yeah, so I wonder what you think about this. I wonder if I could get your advice. And then I'll talk at her for about half an hour and I'll go, thanks, that was really helpful. And she hasn't even said anything. So yeah, I think like that's one of my big hearts is like teaching people and making people laugh. And I think whatever capacity we have to do that, if TikTok got closed tomorrow, like we'd find other avenues and outlets of doing that. And I think, we love the opportunity to speak live as well and things. So yeah, we're really enjoying that.
This has been an incredible conversation, John. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your heart, your story.
Pleasure.
I know this is going to bless so many of our listeners. And I just wondered if you wouldn't mind, as we close, my final kind of thing to request of you, if that's okay, is just some words of encouragement for other young people that want to utilize whatever platform they have to kind of share their story and make positive impact in the way that you and your family have done.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I honestly believe just everyone is an influencer. Like everybody has a level of influence, and you might have a massive platform or you might have a smaller one, and it doesn't really matter. Like you can have a massive platform and use it for evil, or a small platform and change the world. Like, and so I think what I would say is, don't lose sight of who you are and who you've been created to be. Like only you can do what only you can do, and God has made you unique for exactly that reason. And so we can learn from each other and we can sharpen our skills where we have overlaps by looking at other people and being inspired by them. But you're not supposed to be the next whoever, insert the name of your idol. Like you're supposed to be you, and do your best at just being brilliant at that and glorifying God through the use of the gifts he's given you.
That's amazing. That is just so encouraging. John, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Make sure that you're following John on all of the platforms so I don't get the wrong. Do you want to list all the places that people can find and follow your work?
Predominantly Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and we are on YouTube, but YouTube's just been a bit slower. But basically, John E.J., the letters John E.J. Reynolds, and you'll find us if you search it. Yeah.
Amazing. God bless. Thank you so much, John, for your time. All the love and best wishes to you and your family.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Carla.
You've been listening to Faith in Media with Carla Adebekun. Make sure you catch our episodes and hit subscribe. Please share and leave us a comment. Christians in Media is a UK charity that supports, encourages, and inspires Christians from across the ever-changing media landscape. Find out more at www.christiansinmedia.co.uk and connect with us via our socials.